Hello and welcome to the Ideas Factory. I am Naghma. We are back with yet another idea today with Mihir Sharma. We're going to talk about the future of jobs in India, especially Mihir at a time when this digital revolution that is taking over, but it's a mixed bag of for the economy. Now, it is threatening jobs, but it is also creating new jobs. Do you agree with it? Because the blue collar jobs are being threatened, the white collar jobs are being threatened, but there are many sectors which are at the forefront of this revolution, and there new jobs are being created. So, how does this the job scene look like now?
Look, one of the interesting things, and let's take a 200-year approach to this for a moment. For 200 years, we've seen technological innovation come from steam engines all the way up to the computer, and they have all these innovations, all this technical change has both created and destroyed jobs, right? And there was concern each time one of these revolutions began to spread through the workforce that people would be permanently put out of work. And of course, every time it happened, there were entire professions that vanished. But so far, we've been very fortunate. They have been replaced by more productive professions of a different kind. That has been the historical approach, right? One thing may be different about what we are going to go through in the near future. And the automation revolution as such is not necessarily that new a thing. Replacement of blue collar workers by machines is something that we've been worrying about, and societies have been worrying about for 150 years, right?
Yeah.
And all of us have, some societies have suffered deeply. I mean, in Bengal, we will still tell the story about the Dhaka weavers, right? Losing their thumbs because of forced transformation to to machine weaving. But the difference, one of the interesting differences I think about what is going to happen in the next few years, or maybe the next decade or so, is not automation but artificial intelligence. And there, for the first time, you'll get middle level, upper middle class people suddenly under threat. And that's never happened, right? So you've had blue collar workers under threat. You've had maybe lower middle class white collar workers under threat from computers, so secretaries, that kind of thing. But now you'll have people who work in law firms, people who work in newspapers, people who work across the board in jobs that require a certain degree of intelligence, but not always that much creativity on a day-to-day level, right? So the paralegal, etc. All these jobs may disappear and replaced by AI. Who knows? We may anesthetist. There is a strong belief that this job will go, and these are things that people have trained for with some effort, and they didn't think they would.
So that's a big threat. You say?
Yes, well, I'm saying that this is what makes it different. So we are hearing a lot more noise about it, than about previous technological changes, because it's hitting a different class of people, or there's a fear for a different class of people.
There's a fear, but who are? It's also said that probably 69% of there'll be a job loss of about 69% in India. But what kind of, due to automation? You're talking about artificial intelligence,
this is automation,
So this is automation. If it is 69%, it looks big enough to be afraid of.
Well, we should have hoped that there'd be 69% job loss in India anyway. That we would be moving in any case to up the ladder to better jobs, right?
So you're saying this job loss will actually lead to higher skilled jobs, better skilled jobs?
It could, and it has in the past. The fear on this occasion, it is true, is that there will essentially be no replacement for the jobs that are lost, unlike what has happened previously. And one of the reasons for this is that previously, when jobs in low-skilled manufacturing, if Charlie Chaplin modern times manufacturing died, right, then another kind of manufacturing job would come along, slightly higher level, slightly more complicated, that machines couldn't do, and you would be required to supervise the machines. So up till now, we've always had these manufacturing jobs. The fear is that automation will take all manufacturing jobs away completely. Now, first of all, this is not an immediate issue, right? So, for example, on things like textiles, the jobs aren't going away immediately at all. But more to the point, whenever we worry about jobs going away, we should always look at the past, mechanism and try and work out why it isn't happening again. And if it isn't happening this time, that the jobs are being replaced by higher skilled jobs, that may be because of something to do with the Indian workforce. And the Indian workforce, the people in those 69% jobs that are at threat, should be able to move to a better set of jobs.
For example, like if they're moving to high skilled jobs, and these labor intensive jobs are at threat. So you move to high skilled job, but these high skilled jobs could be in e-commerce, in the aggregate. There are lots of aggregator platforms.
Stay in manufacturing. There could be machine supervision, machine repair. Across the board, there are possible jobs, but there is a shortage of skills. You're absolutely right. People are moving to app-based platforms, and people are in fact overqualified. Yesterday, you know how Zomato.
Is that true? And if that is the case, is India prepared for the fallout?
This is India. Everything affects women more. Even right now, you have a women employment crisis.
So, what actions have been taken?
What can you do? I mean, this is a social problem in the end. What you've had in the past 5 to 7 years is an enormous reduction, and I want to talk about this specifically about North India, not the South. Right? You've had an enormous reduction in what is called the labor force participation rate for women, and particularly in rural areas. And why has this happened? It can be one of many reasons. But what is worrying is that as India grows more prosperous, less women work. And it could be for reasons as much as if you're prosperous and sit at home. Or it could be, and this is what is more relevant for your question, that men who were originally employed in the cities, in things like construction, have moved back to the villages. They have not found employment. Because they were not finding employment, women were fired from their jobs and men were given those jobs, because it was assumed that those jobs women should
go to the men and the men
can. Rate thing. So there are assumptions of this kind that we need to work out, need to end in how society is organized. And only until you fix how society is organized can you fix how the economy is organized.
So in case this automation affects, which you're saying that in any case everything affects the women more, so if more and more women are out of the workforce, do you think there is a need that we invest more in the care economy? That's one sector probably where women could be employed more. There's a whole lot which is unemployed and it's a huge part of your workforce.
Well, this is a very complicated question because there is if you start monetizing what is traditionally known as, what was traditionally women's work, right? So care for children, care for the elderly, some kinds of healthcare, some kinds of housework, all right? If you start monetizing that, then it will appear like there's an increase in GDP, it will appear like there's growth, but I am not certain that it will actually lead to an increase in welfare for either the worker or people who are being worked for. I think the deeper, there is no alternative in the short, medium or long run to changing our attitude and women's own attitude in some cases to work, right? I just, I'll put this out there. If we've all heard of how the Asian tigers developed. The Asian tigers developed, we think, okay, maybe capital, maybe skills, maybe whatever, but that's not true. 80% of their growth spurt in the 70s and 80s came from one thing and one thing alone, and that is women joining the workforce. All right. That gave them this enormous, their growth went from 4% to 7% to 8%. We need to start happening on a sustained level for about 10, 15, 20 years. Instead, it's happening in the opposite direction.
So what all should India invest in, looking at all these things that are going to happen eventually, and the nature of job is changing, the focus will be on high skilled jobs. What should we invest in as a country?
I think we should invest in what our people need, right? Step one. So now let's go out and ask people, what is it that they're looking for? And I think that, you know, as you said earlier, if you go and speak to a young person from North India, or, you know, one of those agitating Marathas or someone of that sort, and they all say, we want a government job. All right? You want a government job. What lies behind a government job? What does it mean? A government job is security, status, you know, possibly a chance to get married, all these things, you know, put you there. You're on the ladder. It's not tremendously well paid. You're not going to wind up maybe massively rich, but you know, you'll be okay. Nobody will ask questions about what you do.
Yeah.
I think we need what we need to do is to render that desire irrelevant. You need to be able to say, okay, guys, go out, work for an app-based thing, you know, take a mudra loan, do any of these other things, but you will retain somehow the security and status that comes with having a government job.
Yeah.
How does one do that? And I think one does that by creating other sorts of support, government support for young people to take these things. Whether it is the ability to, whether it is unemployment insurance, whether it is the ability to be retrained, you know, every 5 years, whether it is the possibility of getting in line for a new low-cost housing that is built by the state or something like that. You need to give people this sense of security and stability and status from some source other than a job. And I think that has to be our aim as a society going, you know, in the next 10 to 15 years. It has to be the government's aim for the next 5 and maybe the next 10 years.
So the government's aim should be to encourage this social mobility across industries, especially the digital
social mobility and social security. You know, and mobility will not happen unless people are given the security to take risks in a country like ours. So you need to be able to, you need to set these out there first, and then unfortunately you have to leave it to these young people and to figure out what they want to do, and maybe figure out where our next spurt of growth is coming from, because right now I'm afraid we don't have any other ideas.
You spoke of artificial intelligence, AI, we spoke of automation, that it's a big threat. So, you know, the nature of jobs are changing, but in the process many jobs are also being lost. What should the governments do actually to create an environment which gives that confidence, that safety, or the safeguards for the displaced workforce?
Well, I think one, we need to tell people, and I think that many in the government have tried to do this, that there is no such thing as a job for life anymore, right? It's not going to happen, and they're not going to come back. Second, you need to try and ensure that catastrophic health issues won't put them or their parents out of action, right? And if their parents means that they themselves will have to take care of them. So if that shouldn't happen, because that is sufficient to throw you back into poverty. So that's a major sense of insecurity, right? So you need to have a health backstop. You need to have an education or skills backstop. People need to be able to think that they can go back and pick up a new skill at short notice that will be lucrative. Now, currently we don't have any of these things in place, right? Our skilling program, people will have to pay too much for it. People aren't certain whether it is accessible for them, and finally people aren't certain that after it will be worthwhile, right? The only skilling program that everyone knows at some point might help them is English, right? Frankly, if the government really wants a magic bullet on skilling, just teach everyone English. You know, because that will suddenly massively open up their options as to mobility, massively open up their options as to further skilling and
But that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. We had recently had the Home Minister saying that the
over the course of your schooling, learning English as a skill. You know, if they're uncomfortable thinking of it as a second language, think of it as a skill. All right, it's like maths. All right, teach it like that so that people will know how to use it to pick up further skills.
Okay.
And so yes, you need to give people these basic skills that will allow them to navigate a changed world, right? And we have to learn that our basic blocks of education are different now. You need English, you need financial literacy, you need digital literacy, all right, and you need economic literacy, right? And you put these four things together, and people will be able to figure out for themselves how to move forward, right? They'll be able to figure out for themselves how to save and how to make money, you know, financially. They'll be able to figure out through digital literacy what the jobs of tomorrow are. Through English, they'll be able to apply for them, all right? So these are the skills that you need to impart to people who are 10, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay. Before we wrap up, very quick two questions. India has a huge workforce still in the informal sector. So how should that be incorporated? We have that problem of getting all those people in the informal sector in, you know, to be a part of this growth.
I think that, look, I agree, and I've always thought of this as a problem for India, right? That we have so many informal workers in such a small formal sector. All our, you know, all our protections are given to formal workers. They are protected from being fired. They have PF, and the formal workers have nothing. I think that now we have to realize that it's no longer a problem that can be solved, right? You know, when we heard about demonetization, it was all about, you know, formal bana denge sabko. Formal bhi ho rahe hain bahut. But it's not a solution to the larger problem. There are still 90% of people who are out of this formal safety net and aren't employed formally. I think that you can no longer rely on the formal sector as a way to route these benefits to them. You have to ensure that the informal sector itself is a place where people will want to work. And people can make the choice to work between the informal and formal, and it will not hurt them which they choose. That has to be put out there. And that means that you have to restructure your access to savings, you have to restructure your access to health, all these things which currently are routed through your job, right? Your employer pays for your health, your employer puts money in your PF. Now you have to ensure that somebody else puts money in your PF, somebody else puts money in your health. So that that protection is built up outside. So I think once again,
the whole structural change.
There's a structural change there which says that you need to provide security. Then you no longer have to worry about the informal sector being so large as a problem.
Okay. So we should not actually look at the informal sector as a problem, but basically change the whole structure.
We should take steps to say it's no longer a problem.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not saying you can shrink the size of the informal sector anymore. It looks impossible. So just figure out what about it was the problem. The government's idea of why it is a problem is not my idea of why it's a problem. The government's idea of why it is a problem because it worries the informal sector does not pay enough taxes. That is not why most of us economists worry about it. Most of us economists worry about it because it is unpredictable and it doesn't have enough protections for its workers. Right.
Okay.
And those are the things that we need to fix.
So all the changes that we are now witnessing in India, or we were speaking about the future of jobs and how the nature of jobs will change eventually, but all this is not happening just in India. It has happened elsewhere in the world as well. So what lessons can we draw from some of those countries?
Nothing, unfortunately, because you know, those are countries that had enormous amounts of formal employment and now they're all becoming informal. We've always had been, they're turning to us for lessons, all right, and how to manage with a large informal economy, how do you measure it, etc., etc. We don't have any lessons there. How did they become rich? They became rich through mass manufacturing. Our concern is automation will be so all-pervasive that mass manufacturing will not be an employer for unskilled people anymore. So we do not have a single lesson that we can draw from anywhere except one, and that is that workforces that are provided stability, workforces that are provided security, and workforces that are provided stature, workforces that are mixed in terms of background, that mixed across gender, region, in our case, caste and religion. These are the workforces that do well. And we need to make sure our workforce moves to that level. And it's a social intervention that's required to improve the way that people live and the way that people think. That is the only lesson we can take. We cannot take, there is nothing to be picked up, all right? There is a desire to, among the government, among many people, otherwise also to look outside and say, they have this one scheme somewhere and they have, these people built this road from here to a port. You put these two things together and development will happen in 2015, 2025. That's not how it happens.
Okay. Security and stability, these are the two things that you are talking about.
Invest in your people.
Invest in the people, and that these two terms, these two words actually are the biggest concern right now when we talk about the future of jobs, security and stability. That's what people are worrying about in the job scene. So thank you so much, Mihir, for that talk.
Thank you.